So Sony announced the PlayStation 5 Slim's existence not too long ago, and they announced it was coming out sometime in November. Well, a notable leaker, Bill Kuhn, has announced that he believes and he's hearing that the release date, the official release date, is going to be November 8th. Now, that is a ridiculously short window time to get this from being announced into store shelves and sold in time for the holidays. And it's something that I don't think we see often from Sony. I think typically whenever we hear about Sony, they're always talking about their games years in advance. They're talking about their consoles way in advance, and it's not something that you see often where they just kind of announce these accessories really quickly and release it like in like a month, 2 months, maybe even 3 months time. We see it with the PlayStation Q, where that was announced and had like 3-4 months to release. The PlayStation 5 Slim having like a month, maybe even weeks to release. Spider-Man 2 is a game that we known about for a really long time, but we didn't really start seeing it till the year of its release, and then we didn't really see the actual official announcement release date until like end of the summer game festing. So what I'm guessing, what I'm showcasing, and what I'm trying to get to about what a lot of these announcements, what a lot of these things are really telling me as a fan of Sony PlayStation, is that they're taking a new strategy on marketing. I feel like in the past, Sony has announced games, they have announced consoles way in advance so that they have enough time to ramp up marketing, drum up hype, and get people really, really excited for the future of Sony. I feel like Sony has cemented themselves in a position where they know people are gonna buy their consoles, invest in their ecosystem, without really knowing what is set to come in the future, because they understand that whenever they do start releasing titles, it's gonna be a Naughty Dog, Uncharted, Last of Us style game. It's gonna be a God of War from Santa Monica style game. It's gonna be a banger title, and that's what Sony has really got us consumers really used to, trusting in them to release these type of games, release these type of products into our lives, into our ecosystems. And that's why so many of us invest in the PlayStation ecosystem, again, without any really banger titles. And I get it, right? If you had the option between the Xbox Series X or the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series offers a lot more to the consumer at this time, in my opinion. You have your Game Pass, which is just a monthly subscription, and you get all their banger titles, things like Starfield, things like Hi-Fi Rush. Again, some people might not be like, oh, that ain't really my game. But if we look at PlayStation 5, where, again, we have a Ratchet, Returnal, things like that, that I'm not saying are bad games by no means. And for me, preferably, I prefer those games opposed to Xbox Series offerings. But I can understand how a big open Bethesda RPG like Starfield is like a mainline game. That is a game that you want to, go to a specific ecosystem just to experience that game. And, arguably now we have Spider-Man 2, and I would say that that is, a very PlayStation style game. It is, 30 hours of amazing storytelling, amazing cinematography, things that we come to expect from PlayStation. But I guess what I'm trying to get to in all of this rumble mumble jumbo is that Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, they all have their different marketing terms, right? And we're used to all of them typically announcing their things way in advance. Xbox is really on that like trend of announcing things years in advance, and we see that to its detriment. We see where Xbox announces things like Avowed 3 years in advance, things like Fable without an official release date. A lot of like main games that people are excited for but don't know when they're gonna receive it, so it means literally nothing to them. Versus us on the Sony side, we know they're gonna release banger titles, and then when they do, announce a Spider-Man 2 and show us gameplay, we know the release date is coming soon. And I feel like this is playing well into the strengths of Sony. And I know a lot of us as PlayStation fans, or even just gamers in general, are really upset with Sony right now because we're like, we don't know what 2024 holds. And for a lot of people, in the conversation I'm starting to hear is that if they announce a game in 2024 that is coming out, they doubt that it's going to be releasing in 2024 per, past Sony, per what we used to PlayStation doing. and I get that sentiment. But if we look at like this generation, I definitely think they've turned a corner on their way of announcing things. I think when they announced factions and we didn't really get nothing, and then now we know it's on ice and stuff like that, things like that hurt the image of Sony. And I think they're so dead set on trying to protect their image. They don't want to announce a game and have to delay the release date. I don't think they want to announce a game and have to put a project on ice. I think right now, with the way that game development is going in a specific route and people aren't really sure when an official release date might actually happen, right? I feel like people are definitely waiting till it is 100% this is what we're going to do, or at least that's what Sony's doing, because we see that they hold off on their release dates until the last moment. We saw it last year with God of War Ragnarok, where there was a bunch of speculation, a bunch of debate as to whether or not it would even make its 2022 deadline. And sure enough, Sony Santa Monica hit the deadline. They announced it, like, I think it was like a month in advance what the actual release date was. And I just feel like this is very new to Sony. It's very new to us as consumers. And this is all just me speculating based off of what I think and what I'm seeing, the patterns that I'm starting to see form within this new PlayStation 5 ecosystem of Sony. And personally, I prefer that. I'd rather not really know what the game is or when it's coming out until they're certain that this is it. Until I know for a fact that I'm getting this soon. Had they announced a bunch of games at the Sony showcase this year that would have really hyped us up, really got us excited, and then say no release date, I don't think that would have been as impactful as, let's say, 2024. They're like Sony Santa Monica's brand new IP releasing sometime in 2024. And then if you get to like the middle of the year and we're all still like, is it going to make 2024? Is it going to even hit it? And then boom, Summer Game Fest, they're like, hey, in October, you're getting Sony Santa Monica's game. We know that creates multiple conversations, that creates hype around this game, that creates a speculation, and that is amazing word of mouth for the marketing. I think, again, Spider-Man 2 is getting a lot of word of mouth right now, and even before, leading up to hype as to when it would be releasing. And then when we got the release date, we're like, is it going to officially hit that release date, because it's cutting it pretty close. And then a lot of these things that I think, had they just announced the release date back when, the game was a little earlier, back when it was at the beginning of the year, I don't think it would have jumped up as much hype as it did when they actually finally released the release date, if that makes sense. This is something that I see one other main publisher do, and that's Nintendo. Nintendo doesn't announce their games years in advance, with some games, on the contrary, like Metroid Prime 4 or Tears of the Kingdom. And I feel like, again, to those two games, it is on the detriment to those games. I feel like had we got announced, the beginning of this year, that we're getting a sequel to Breath of the Wild, that would have broke the internet. And I feel like because we had like kind of heard about it for so long and we knew it was coming, there was a lot of speculation to when it was going to come out. I definitely felt like the hype, the drum up to it, didn't really like happen as much, because again, we were at the, we knew this was coming, it was coming eventually, we knew what to expect, etc. But had they announced it this year and then 3 months later, like, announce a release date, and then 3 months from then release the game, it would have broke the internet 10 times over. Things like Kirby's Forgotten Land, which is a much smaller game, and obviously didn't make the waves that Tears of the Kingdom did, but the game was, like, I'm not going to say overhyped, but it definitely received a lot more press and attention than I think it would have had they announced it 4 or 5 years in advance. And I feel like Nintendo does really, really good at just announcing their games when they know for certain they're going to reach their deadline. And I feel like Sony is taking a lot of notes from what Nintendo's doing. Even if you look at things like their price tags, even if you look at things like their consoles being announced a month in advance, that is crazy. That is something unheard of on PlayStation's end, and this might piss off a lot of like die-hard, Sony first-party fanboys, and that's fine, because in the end of the day, Sony knows once that next Naughty Dog game is coming out, once that next Sony Santa Monica game is announced, people are going to be excited. People aren't going to remember the first 3 years of PlayStation 5 because we're going to be so busy enjoying the amazing games we're receiving day after day or year after year, etc. And I feel like, again, this is all obviously up to Sony. They have to deliver on this. This is something that I'm trusting in them to do. And the reason why I'm not really concerned about 2024 for Sony is because I feel like they're on this trend of announcing games and releasing them, announcing products and releasing them in a very short window. All of this is just speculation. Again, this is just what I see, what I think. I could be 100% wrong. Feel free to roast me in the comments. Let me know how wrong I am and why I'm talking crazy, whatever. If you guys do like the video, do me a favor and like this video. If you guys want to hear more stuff like this, consider subscribing. I try to touch on things that I find are interesting when I find them interesting. With all that being said, I'm going to end this video here. See you guys on the next one.